Hello there. From Amazon's star-studded Indian cricket soap to Netflix's collaboration with French channel TF1 on a 19th century drama. Welcome to our monthly look at what's hot in the world of TV with Deeptika Laurent. Hello.
Hi, Eve.
Thank you for joining us. Now let's start with Amazon's Emmy award-winning show, The Marvelous Mrs Mazal. It's back for a third season.
That's right, The Marvelous Mrs Mazal. It's a drama, musical, comedy of sorts from the husband and wife duo Amy Sherman Palladino and Daniel Palladino, who brought us famously the Gilmore Girls. So The Marvelous Mrs Mazal is about Mrs Mazal. She's a 1950s wealthy New York Jewish housewife who accidentally becomes a star stand-up comedian. In season 3, it's now the 60s, and Mrs. Mazal is on a cross-country tour as an opening act for a big singer, Shai Baldwin. Take a look.
I met this perfectly marvelous girl in this perfectly wonderful place as I lifted a glass to the start of a marvelous year. Before you knew it, she called on the phone.
Little warning would have been nice.
Go, 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 go.
I was no longer alone, but sat delighting.
I am not a prostitute. I'm a comic.
Is there a difference?
Yes, prostitutes get paid more.
Hilarious. You should go into comedy.
I did.
It definitely seems very joyful. What do you make of season 3?
Well, it's interesting talking to some colleagues here. Some people find the show rather anachronistic, that it's not really representative of how people spoke at the time or indeed Jewish families. For me, the show does veer into being annoying at times. Mrs. Mazal and her family can be so snobbish, so elitist, so overprivileged and so oblivious to all of that wealth. And season 3 is interesting because it does tackle that issue of wealth. What I like are the secondary storylines in this season. So you have, they tackle things like gambling problems, the beatnik movement, the Chinese community, even Mrs. Mazal's social butterfly mother finds herself in a battle of for sexual equality. You know, each topic, whether it's race or class or women's rights or free speech, it's always tackled in a very joyful way, a sort of absurdist way that's very trademark of this show. And I mean, that's the reason it won all those Emmy awards for the whole cast. You know, the acting and writing really transcends this show into something so original and truly joyous.
Okay, well, it's a big month for Amazon Prime because the new season of another huge show is out, and the Indian cricket drama Inside Edge.
That's right. This drama is back for a second season. It's featuring some big Indian names like Vivek Oberoi. It's co-produced by a very well-known actor-producer, Farhan Akhtar. It's inspired by the Indian Premier League cricket competition. It traces the locker room drama of a champion cricket team dealing with players, drug addiction, sex scandals, and the murky world of match fixing. The first season took India by storm. At the time, it was the most watched show on Amazon India's network. After all, cricket to India is what, you know, football is to Brazil. Take a look at a little bit of the show.
Prashant Kanogia.
ये देखो खून अभी भी गरम
Clearly, he's off form. I don't care. I am the captain of the Mavericks, and I decide. I want Prashant on the team.
क्रिकेट में परफॉर्मेंस एनहांसिंग ड्रग्स के बहुत फायदे हो सकते हैं.
and all player will take Hurricane will win.
If I find out that you have allowed any wrongdoing in the PPL, I assure you that you and this power play league will be appropriately punished.
Hugely successful in India. Is it for everyone, though? What are your thoughts on season 2?
Well, you do need to like or at least follow a little bit of cricket to understand this. But cricket is interestingly, it's sort of the center of the show. It's not really all about that. It's still, season 2 still has that sort of soap opera-esque feel about it. It's very overdramatic. It's got the villains and the incorruptible heroes. There's also a great episode about the auctioning off of new players, and you really get an idea of how commodified the sport is. It does feel, though, a little bit of the same thing. There is a new villain, there are new problems, but it still feels like it doesn't seem to say anything new at this time, and some of the romantic entanglements do feel a little bit contrived. Nevertheless, this is a bold, daring show, and it's nice to see the female characters really portrayed as the brains behind this whole operation.
And India has actually become a major market for streaming platforms, with billions of dollars to be made.
That's right. And Eve, it's really interesting what's happening in India. I mean, they estimate that India will have one of the biggest youth populations in the next decade. And really the way streaming platforms are approaching that is proof of how interesting this market is. I mean, Apple TV Plus and Netflix in India, their subscriptions for their platforms are between €25 and €50. Reed Hastings, who's the CEO of Netflix, he recently said that the platform's next 100 million users would come from India. And what's interesting is Indians are consuming television on their smartphones. And you see that figure there. In 2022, the number of smartphones in India will reach 859 million. So it's no surprise that everyone's jostling to hit the sweet spot with shows that will attract first and foremost Indians.
Okay, well, this is our last TV series show of the decade, Dipti. So let's look back for a minute at the TV shows that have dominated the past decade. Have you got, if you could pick one?
It's really hard, isn't it?
An all-time favourite?
You know what? I would probably have to go with Orange is the New Black. It was such a good show. It was so important.
I remember watching it for the very first episode of Homeland.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember thinking, I don't think I've ever seen anything as good as this before. This female character, Claire Danes, she's bipolar and she's just so interesting. And she's not even that nice often. I really like that.
But they're always the best shows where you have these anti-heroines, isn't it? Well, you know, it's interesting. Before we take a look at the shows that really marked the decade, I thought it'd be fun to take a straw poll around the newsroom to see what our colleagues found to be the most iconic shows of the decade. Take a look.
Breaking Bad. It changed so much of the way that we consume television. It was also very dark, but incredibly watchable, and it ended when it should have.
Transparent, because I just love the family dynamic that's in the show, and the actors are great.
Game of Thrones, obviously, we can't go out the last decade without mentioning it.
Fleabag, and also Killing Eve. I'm a big fan of Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Her work is a really realistic portrayal of women.
Casa de Papel. It's fairly recent, but it's been ages since I've been properly hooked by a series.
Binging.
Variety.
On demand.
Adventure.
You know, if there was one word for me that would describe the decade, Eve, it would have to be Netflix, because they've come and changed the game in terms of how we're watching TV. And, you know, as I mentioned before, Orange is the New Black, such an important show of the new decade. It took us somewhere where television had never been, inside a women's prison. It dealt with things like prisoners' rights, sexual harassment, drugs, police brutality. Another show that I really loved was Girls in the early part of the decade. I just thought that was a really important show. It was a sort of millennial follow-up to Sex and the City.
Like an anti-Sex and the City.
Exactly, almost like an anti-Sex and the City, because Sex and the City was so glossy and it was about fashion and these really well put together women, and Girls were about girls who were, you know, sometimes not even very likable, a little bit endearing, and totally not put together. On Netflix, Black Mirror, I guess we have to say that was a really big show. It was a game changer, you know. It sort of showed us what our future looked like, and it's a little bit scary, to be honest, and it did expose our fear of technology.
Something really scary as well, and that hasn't been mentioned, surprisingly, is Handmaid's Tale.
Yes, that's right.
I remember I started watching that, and I watched it both with my husband and my mum, and both of them had to stop watching it because they found it too violent. But I just found those characters just amazing. I
agree. It was very violent. It was almost too violent for me. I couldn't get past really the second season. It was just so dark and also very futuristic. And I didn't really like seeing the way our possible future could look like. But there were a lot of comedies that marked this decade. Veep, which was a really good one, you know, American political satire about U.S. politics that ended up sort of catching up with reality when Donald Trump got elected. And again, we were talking about anti-heroines before, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character was so foul-mouthed and egotistical, Selena Myers, and it was what made that show so watchable. And then there's another show I've spoken about before that doesn't get enough attention. It's a very sweet, eccentric Canadian comedy called Schitt's Creek. It did get attention this year because it was nominated for an Emmy. A video rental mogul boss, and he loses his money, and his family's forced to live in a country town that he bought as a joke for his family years ago. It's such good acting that makes these awful, judgmental characters so likable in the end.
I just have to quickly mention Downton Abbey and Peaky Blinders.
Absolutely.
From the homeland, my homeland, made me very homesick, especially Peaky Blinders, set in Birmingham. Okay, well, finally from you, Netflix has teamed up with the French TV channel TF1 or TF1 for the new period drama called Le Bazar de la Charité.
Yeah, that's right. Or The Bonfire of Destiny, as it's known on Netflix. It's really interesting because Netflix has produced several French shows in the past. They've also bought the rights to TV shows. This is the first time they're actually pre-financing part of a production, and they'll be broadcasting the show entirely across the world. Le Bazar de la Charité, or The Bonfire of Destiny, is centered on the aftermath of a real-life 1897 fire at a Parisian charity house that killed a lot of people. It looks at wealthy male power, the subservient role of women, anarchists, social ranking, poverty. It's got that upstairs-downstairs drama that Downton Abbey has, which is why some people may have likened it to like the French Downton Abbey. It's been a huge hit in France. The first episodes here were dominating the ratings, and it's got the costumes and the drama and the nail-biting intrigue and suspense. It's perfect for the holidays, I think.
Okay, well, you can judge for yourself. Le Bazar de la Charité, or The Bonfire of Destiny, will come out this month on Netflix. We're going to leave you with a sneak peek. Dipti, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to see you next year, decade, for more TV shows. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
On accuse d'avoir posé une bombe au bazar.
Retrouvez-les.
C'est lui qui m'a sauvé la vie. Il est innocent.
Ma fille est morte dans l'incendie.
Vous voulez que je prenne la place de votre fille? Vous êtes complètement folle.